Good day, viewers. Welcome back to the Atheist Roundtable with your host, David Oliverio, the Preaching Humanist. That is I. And look how close we are together. Let's do why don't we just do an atheist group hug? Come on, atheist group hug. We're going to start something new. Yeah, okay. So I got a special guest today. This is Matthew Carey. Welcome,
Hello.
Matthew.
Hello,
Matthew.
We're going to talk about Matthew here in a moment before we get to the topic, and I'll let you give a quick little bio. Of course, Eric and Minot, he's my regulars here.
Y'all?
And Andrew, you're out there. We miss you, buddy. Andrew, he's out working, so he'll be back in a few weeks. So Eric and I had a good time yesterday. We went back out with our atheist activism, and boy, we had that one young man get a little angry at us. He hit us, didn't he?
He did. Well, he tried to hit us with what he thought was his science knowledge, but apparently wasn't real science knowledge. But yeah, he tried to tell us he had a whole lot of medical knowledge and proceeded to say, do you know how perfect the human body is? Which right there made me understand that he did not have much medical knowledge, if he really had any, because the human body is very far from perfect. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he took off, boy. He hit us with that. And I tried to put the weight of evidence on him and ask him the questions like, how do you know? And how do you know if this is true? He just took off, literally running.
Yeah.
He took off running.
He was running. He was shouting at us as he ran away, putting his headphones back on. He wouldn't come back and talk to us. He didn't want to discuss anything. Like you get so many of these people who, they say, oh, science and, God go hand in hand, but they don't really want to discuss it. They just want to pound you over the head with...
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Matthew. I'm going to give you a minute. So first, before you give a quick bio, let me put my old man glasses on so I can read. Matthew Carey is a research engineering scientist. Gave me a big smile. I love science.
Yeah.
Assistant at University of Texas in the big city of Temple, Texas. Not too far north of here. Not far from where most of my life was spent in Waco, otherwise known as Waco, Texas, where there are more Baptists than people, right? So, Matthew, give us a quick little bio, your background,
sure.
and so forth.
I graduated from Norfolk State University in 2016. I studied general biology. I've always been into the plant sciences. So my first job out of college was at UNC Chapel Hill, working in a disease ecology lab. And I ended up over here at the University of Texas, working in a lab studying local adaptation in plants. And we measure a bunch of aspects of plant performance and try to correlate that to specific genes.
Beautiful. Now, tell us your background briefly, your upbringing. Was it religious before you became an atheist?
Yeah. Both of my parents, or my family's Christian. They're Baptist Christians. So my upbringing was religious, but I always had a foundation of skepticism instilled in me.
Nice.
So it was kind of background in my operation through life, but it was always just a ritualistic thing that I did and never really questioned.
Okay. So you've been basically a lifelong atheist.
Yeah, I mean...
You were spared the indoctrination that a lot of us had.
Without knowing what it is, even... Maybe when you were young, because you said you didn't really ever incorporate that into your...
I did have fear of hell, so that was the one irrational thing that I clinged on to, regardless of my lack of, application of the Bible to any other facet of my life. I always had like a weird fear of hell, so when
interesting.
Well, it's not weird. It's not weird at all. I mean, they instill that, and I say they, I mean, in general, people in within the religious culture, and they instill it in you. You went from a child, you do the things that are right, or you're going to burn in hell. So that's pretty
it's like
understandable.
Hell is the recurring theme in a lot of these stories.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
And not just Christianity.
Oh, no.
But that was...
I did not realize that until recently, that in Christian stories, hell is the overriding big fear factor.
Right.
But it's like, which hell? So that was my first step out, was becoming a little more critical, thinking, okay, I really just lacked humility in my perception of life. I assumed that my version of God was that's the only hell that I could possibly go to. So I wasn't even afraid of all of the other hells. And I started to just use logic and apply it.
That's beautiful. What I think we really want to do today, why don't we stick to the outline that the premise we use here would be that little episode I did on thinking like a scientist and how some of us were able to apply the scientific method, like me and many others who were raised hardcore fundamentalist Pentecostal Christianity as a young preacher, but yet some of us never had the education and knowledge, like someone like you, Matthew, that you've gone to school, you're encouraged to learn, to go and get a proper education. I was discouraged from that because it was all Holy Ghost and Bible, right?
Yeah.
But yet myself and many others, lacking that education and critical thinking, somehow innately had that type of thinking to apply the test of truth, the greatest arbiter of truth using the scientific method, to this thing called Christianity and the Bible, like I did. I talk about it all the time. So we want to talk about that today. Why maybe you think, or do you have any information data on that? Be thinking about that, because in a moment we'll talk about that.
Okay.
How some people can actually apply that type of thinking with zero education in it. So on the episode I discussed what thinking like a scientist is. I think we all know it's being skeptical, using empirical evidence. That four-letter word that starts with a big F, right? To a lot of Christian apologists, they don't like empirical evidence because it actually works for a lot of things, doesn't it? So thinking like a scientist is having a skeptical mind, using empirical evidence, and of course the test of truth, which is the scientific method. So I discussed all that on the episode and so forth. So I do want you to discuss that a little bit. Let's go over the scientific method. And I am hoping that there are believers that are watching. And now my Preaching Humanist show, I'm trying to get back to the original roots and objective of the show is to try to reach believers that are questioning and doubting, kind of those on the fence. You know, they need to hear this stuff. And we want to help you along in your journey. So we have a real-life scientist here who can help explain this scientific method of empirical evidence and data and so forth. So how would you just basically describe that?
Well, I view the scientific method as an exercise in humility, in the fact that you are acknowledging that you are fallible, that you are working with a limited set of senses, that you could be wrong. So you go through a strict regimental process of minimizing your biases. That's essentially what it is. And you rely on independent confirmation and repetition of experiments over time. And that's how you build you proportion your confidence in these interactions based on the evidence that you accrue. So
it reminds me of a quote. I think it was David Hume or whatever years ago. A wise person proportions his beliefs to the evidence. Right? He adjusts his beliefs to something that's already been tested. Right? So what would you say, Matthew, to or any of you guys, when we're out there with activism and talking to believers, when they always tell us, oh, you believe in science so strongly, you worship science, or it's not a perfect method. But I always tell them, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the best method that we have, right, currently to distinguish truth from falsity?
Yes, it is. And
I mean, is there another method besides there's science and, you know, the scientific method, and then there's taking things on faith? I mean, what's in between? I don't think there is anything in between.
There's relativism, there's intuition. You talk to New Agers, they're going to just take anything as relative, right?
Well,
without absolute. Just whatever's truth to you.
Yeah, I mean, objective truth, that really plays a big part in our lives, whether we like it or not. What is objective fact or truth? I just view it as something that all people from just different backgrounds can agree on. So if you experimentally produce a piece of data, and you put it out for people and you let them examine, people of faith, secular people, scientists, accountants, anybody can test that and come to the same conclusion, even though in their mind they're wishful wishful thinking might have led them to propose, no, this is because of the cause is, say, X. But if the experiments truly show the cause is Y, and everybody can see that it is actually Y, then that comes out to be an objective fact.
Okay.
And basing our lives on objective fact is so important and good, because that's the way, as far as we've observed, the world works. If we don't see mysticism at work in this world, and for any knowledge that we've gained in this world that helps our lives, like better technology, better banking systems, better mode of ruling a country, like democracy, all these things. These things we've eventually come to it through empiricism. Really, we've tried in all these fields. We've tried many different ways of doing it, and then it just comes down to, hey, let's pick the one that works best for us all. And then why don't you apply this to your own life? That's my question.
Yeah. What I get from believers all the time, and you can help me on this, Matthew, is when we try to describe the actual testing that science does and how you can actually test the Bible and these claims, I get from Christians all the time, or even pastors that I've talked to through the years, is, well, these things are untestable. Science has a place in our society to test, of course, the natural world, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to the matters of faith and supernaturalism, these are untestable, because God, of course, their God, and no one else's God, is above and beyond, right? It's more transcendent. You can't really test that. And it goes back to Stephen Jay Gould's quote about the magisteria of the two different realms.
It can be, if you are asserting that your God or gods they're making manifestable actions in the natural world. So, but the one thing that we can't do is determine an actual mechanistic link to these supernatural phenomena, or to these natural phenomena that are manifesting with a supernatural agent causing it. So we don't, that's our limitation. We could potentially examine reality and see interactions or phenomena that you are claiming to be caused by a supernatural agent, but we're limited in our ability to actually determine a link.
And that's
because
where
we are limited in the natural realm. That's all we have in nature.
Yeah, but as a scientist, when you're doing your plant science or genetics and so forth, is there any reason to believe, using the scientific method, reality, to actually believe that there must be a causation of something supernatural? Because that's what we get from believers all the time. Like yesterday out at Town Lake. Remember, Eric?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing that, you constantly hear is, what about, and literally the guy who said he had so much medical knowledge said, where did this come from? And he waved his hand like this. And I was, well, what do you mean by with this? What is this? He said, well, this, that tree, and this wood, everything. And so, well, I mean, I could go into a very simple explanation about, well, that tree came from a seed, and and the wood came from another tree, but that's not what he meant. He said, where does it all come from? And well, nobody, we don't claim to know where it all comes from or where the absolute perfect very beginning was, but we say, I don't know, and now let's figure it out. And scientists, they're doing through theory of evolution, Big Bang theory, and those things. Their way of explaining it is just, it's just there because he made it, and that's not in any way, shape, or form scientific, obviously, so it's just, it's their way of trying to put us off.
Yeah.
They don't want to use science because it makes them uncomfortable. It makes them uncomfortable, just exactly like I said. He said he had all this medical knowledge. The human body is perfect. I mean, that is such a ridiculous statement. The human body is so far from perfect. You have autoimmune diseases where the body attacks itself. You have birth defects where, obviously, children are born with, heart defects and so many various other things, So,
in just one sentence, it just comes down to, hey, when you have an argument with some people in your lives, you might have noticed some people come to, hey, that's my story and I'm sticking with it. This is no different from that.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want to really and truly discuss it on any level, and not most of them. There are those
and
who
that
will
view
discuss
does
it.
not benefit. That view does not enrich anybody's well-being.
Well, it does for them because it keeps them in their comfortable spot. Mm-hmm. If they can just continually say, you can't explain where everything absolutely started. Well, no, I cannot. Nobody can.
That's the God of the gap.
But we are working towards that through science.
And that's a huge misconception in thinking in the fact that science does not create absolute answers for anything. We are creating a tentative, probabilistic model of reality by exercising science. And that's one thing. I mean, that's why I started with humility, because you have to have some level of doubt.
That's
you can't
all we
be
can
moving
do.
through reality with extreme confidence like this. And
absolutely.
Because you are susceptible to error, and that's essentially why you should try to shape your model of reality with objective reality, because you should try to minimize the wrong things you believe. So.
Yeah, that's all we're capable of, So with the tools we have, we just have to do the best we can.
Mm-hmm. But that's not what believers want to hear, right? I agree with y'all.
So,
I agree, but they want to hear that absolute certainty. And I appreciate you saying the humility word, because when I'm out talking to believers, I defend people like you all the time. I know you're not perfect, but you're humble, and most people I know in the realm of science say we don't know everything, but we're just learning, we're open. So when believers tell me these scientists are arrogant and proud, they think they know it all. No, they don't.
The arrogant ones.
I always tell them, no, they don't.
So let's take a typical real-life example of how you can apply the scientific method. I was just talking to you before this show, and one example that came up was, okay, you're seeking a job, let's say. Mm-hmm. And there are other people interviewing for the same job, and you may or may not get it. Now, a person of faith may have the wishful thinking, if I pray hard enough, God is going to give me the job, right? Now, let's explore how scientific thinking can help the person seeking the job here, the job seeker, to have better outcomes, not just to get the job, just to keep the person himself or herself from a physical dissonance of, hey, I should have gotten this job, why didn't I get it? If you're left with, I should have gotten this job, I didn't get it, then that's going to be a source of stress for you for the following days. But if you understand it more objectively, then maybe you can avoid that stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
another thing to think about is something that I heard. I think maybe it might have been Christopher Hitchens, and he probably even wasn't the first one to say it. But you have Christian scientists, who, as far as I'm concerned, are some of the most horrible people on the earth, because they won't take their children to, seek medicine and help, because they think you pray it away. And the Bible says, David, you probably know the quote, and I don't, but in the Bible, that you don't trust in God for your, to heal you. Mm-hmm. So, but, and within this debate Christopher Hitchens was having with this other person, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about that prayer heals. Prayer heals, it heals. And he said, okay, well, if prayer heals, testable. And they gave, and this other person gave examples of cancer. Well, people get together, they pray for this person, and their cancer goes away. Well, okay, we all know it's the arguments, testable. Okay, modern medicine and this and that and the other. So, but Christopher Hitchens had a very simple response. Well, do this. If God can heal cancer, if he can heal heart disease, if you can pray for people and that stuff will go away, do this. You get a person who has a missing limb, missing arm. Mm-hmm. Pray for that arm to come back, because that is a medical issue as well.
Actually prove it.
Pray for that arm to come back. Has it ever happened?
And if it does not happen, then at least be honest enough to call God impotent.
Yeah.
Right. But the guy he was arguing against actually said, "Oh, I believe it could. I believe that if we prayed hard enough, an arm would grow back."
So what do we do when we go out and talk to? What do we do when we go out and talk to Christians? This is one of my favorite things. You guys hear me say it all the time. I tell Christians, I say, "Can you demonstrate God? can you grow a limb on an amputee? Jesus said, you will do greater works than I did because I go to the Father, John 15. I quote the scriptures about demonstrating God. So these supernatural claims are testable because they have entered the transcendent world into the natural world, correct? Exactly. So they can be tested. Prayer has been tested. It's the inefficacy of prayer, right? They've done blind tests and studies in hospitals about people that were prayed for and others that were not. And guess what the results were? Zero evidence. It's the same on both sides. So
I want to explore that, a simple example of someone seeking a job, relying on faith versus another mode. So what are the kind of questions that come to mind? Well, one of the things could be, am I a good person? Am I on the good side of God, and is God going to give me the job? So that's on one side, that can be the question. On the other side, somebody could think, what is the competition? What are the other candidates? Are they comparable? Are they better? Less qualified? Am I qualified enough? If I'm the interviewer, what would they like to see in me? And then do I bring that to the job? Just things like that.
Being prepared.
Yes.
Yeah.
So which one, would you think actually helps? Which kind of thinking would help the job candidate?
Well, I mean, you know what I'm going to say. It's the being prepared. It's the doing your homework. It's the doing the research about the job and what the requirements are. And, all those things, praying about it. If you, if you do none of those things and you just pray, for this job, you're not qualified for the job in any way, shape, or form. Very doubtful you're going to get that job.
So what do you say to a person who relies on just prayer to get a job, but when they don't get the job, they just say, oh, I must have done something bad. That's why. Justify it for God's sake. Put God as I cannot do anything wrong. It was that myself, I did something improper or wrong, that's why I didn't get the job.
Or was it God's will?
Yeah. And if they get the job, they're going to say, look, I prayed and God gave me the job. So
you can't argue with those
isn't this a moral deficiency in giving credit to the wrong source?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that, definitely.
You've got to give credit to where it belongs.
Of course.
That's basic honesty.
Yeah. That's just coming from the human mind.
Yeah.
And we know that, but it's hard for them to understand that. Can we switch gears real quick? Because here's the thing I want to get to, and I want to pick your brain a little bit on this, okay? Because you're the scientist. I'm constantly learning, and once we get to a point we think we know everything, that's not a good point, is it? It's always good to read and learn from people that are specialized in different areas, just like I would hope people would come to me with questions about fitness and health, because I've been in fitness and health for over 40 years, and I'm a personal trainer, right? We all have our specialty. You're a nurse, Eric. I would come to you because you're a professional in that area. Manoj, you're a computer engineer. I come to you in different areas.
Conspiracy theorist.
What's that?
Conspiracy.
Yeah, right. I don't see that lining up with you, with your scientific brain there, Manoj. Anywho, so I want to discuss why. Here's my point, and I talk to believers and my fellow atheists. Some of us, we individuals who were not raised in an environment maybe like you, okay, encouraged to, or that matter, most of you here, you were encouraged to pursue education, knowledge, science, philosophy. Some of us, some individuals, have that innate ability, or maybe preconditioned, to have that particular type thinking of critical thinking, of putting God to the test, the Bible to the test, like I did when back in 1989. I tested this stuff, but I didn't have any understanding of critical thinking, of testing the scriptures like I finally did. But where did that come from? Do you think that some people are preconditioned with that type of thinking? Because my two siblings have never once had that type thinking. They do in the natural things in their jobs, but not in supernatural.
I mean, to be super cynical, I think all people are preconditioned to that type of thinking. I think that patternicity and superstition just helped us survive as a species. And, I mean, if that is a pathway to assigning agency to things that don't necessarily deserve it. And so I don't know whether or not there's variation in individuals and their capacity to reason out of these logical pitfalls, but I assume that there is. I don't know whether
it comes right down to building up
or actually, I don't know what the relative influence is.
Well, I mean, I think religion,
no idea.
And religious institutions, they don't want us to be intelligent, and they say that directly and indirectly. But one of these church signs, good example, and I actually got a picture here of a bunch of them. But some of these things, and one of them that I'm just looking at here says, the more educated we become, the farther we move away from God. This is on the Church of Christ billboard.
Wow.
Faith sees God, intellect does not. Faith is believing in something when common sense tells you not to. And that's scary to me. That they would actively promote, don't believe your eyes, don't believe what evidence shows. Simply go with what
they're
we've
doing
taught
a
you.
great injustice. They're just holding back humanity. This is
absolutely
atrocious. Yeah.
That's why we do what we do.
In a civilized world, that's just crime. It's like rape and incest or anything bad.
It is. I absolutely believe that it has held back, humans in general, as far as progressing and, being able to advance science, absolutely, it has.
But when you say the word science, and we talk about it so often, and by the way, guys, I'm having our new signs made up for activism, and we're going to have more provocative type questions on there, like, why do you need a God? Is God real? Prove it and show me, and so forth, right? But I do want to get a sign also that says promoting science and reason, because that's very important. And this leads me to my next point real quick, is we had a fellow atheist approach us. I don't know if it was Andrew or you, Eric, but under the bridge a few weeks ago, he was playing the devil's advocate, right? Yeah. And he came to me and said, why are you not promoting science? Why do you have to say, ask an atheist or secular humanism, good without God? You should just be promoting the scientific method instead of talking about atheism because, right?
Exist.
What's that?
Why compatibilists exist. I mean, you're able to hold, I don't know, there's young earth creationists that are also astrophysics professors. Like this, you can be both.
Okay, and that's where you bring into the compartmentalizing that wall that they build up.
So that's why just teaching science isn't enough. You have to teach skepticism. I mean, skepticism is the foundation of the scientific method, but it has to be deeper than just following a regimental protocol to attacking problems. It's your approach to these problems as well. It's your lack of confidence in the interactions and your lack of bias as well. Yes.
When you compartmentalize bodies of knowledge like that, I can see that that's a source of big stress in your own being. It's just parts of you are just not in agreement, and you have to somehow justify this, and you may seek very unreasonable ways to justify this. So, for example, you can say, okay, I'm a doctor, I know medicine, I can treat people, and I'm relying completely on science there. But then for my own personal, financial, or relationships and other areas of my life, I'm going to rely on God. And this is a big source of dissonance. It's like, a split personality. It's never... Imagine how much this doctor would benefit just by going one way and just being free of this, having to justify these things. So it removes the stress and it just frees your mind up and to live more authentically and more comfortably. I just think.
Beautiful. Yeah. Cognitive dissonance, right? That psychological discomfort people feel when they hold two conflicting views. Hell, I'll go and say this. My brother-in-law, my little sister's husband, you'll appreciate this, is a man of science. He has a degree in physics. Wonderful guy, great husband to my little sister, great father to my two nieces. They're very Baptist, very sweet people, but he is a man of science, but yet he does believe strongly in the Lord Jesus Christ and I think, a 6,000 to 10,000 year old Earth. And he's a man of, he has a degree in physics.
I don't understand that, I just don't get it. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who are like that, very highly educated, where they're physicists or biologists or whatever, and they hold this young Earth.
That contradicts so many independent lines of study.
Right.
That it makes you question their authenticity. Like,
it is
not to be cynical, but
it is empirical data. There are people like that.
Yeah, how do you
and we just have to
data?
Figure out how that happens.
With this book, the Bible, I'm pointing down here to my favorite book. Everybody knows this. I've renamed it The Adult Book of Fairy Tales, Fables, Absurdities, and Atrocities. Oops, the Bible. But this book does teach, remember this was written 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, teaches people to not trust in human enlightened mind or the reason of the brain. So Martin Luther's favorite quote, I love this from Martin Luther, reason is the devil's bride, a beautiful whore, and God's worst enemy. Faith must trample underfoot all sense, all rationality, and all reason.
Well, he was a smart guy. That's a very real quote. I mean, that's something that is applied by religion every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah. So, one more statement before we close here. I want to make sure and give an answer to the atheist that approached us, the young man, and asked me why we're not promoting just science instead of atheism. And I gave him a good answer, I thought, Eric. I said, we do this, of course we do promote science, no doubt, even though people will start accusing us of scientism, right away. Aha, you worship science, We don't worship it. It's a method of distinguishing truth from falsity and so forth. But I told him...
One of the reasons is you do want to pick on those people. Pick on those faithful people. It's just fun.
It is fun. You got to admit, it is kind of fun. Actually, I don't like making fun of the people as much. I like to pick on the Bible. I try to be nice to the person, but sometimes it's so hard.
Even though they deserve to be picked on.
Some of them do, like that guy yesterday. He was a rascal, wasn't he? Yeah. So I went ahead and told this young man, I said, the reason we use the word atheist is we're just trying to normalize it because of the reaction we get from so many people when they see the word atheist. We're trying to normalize it. So you guys want to share anything else? Matthew, you have anything else you want to give us?
I guess I'd like to clear up the distinction between scientists and the institution of science. Okay. Science is a method that we use. It's not a dogmatic list that everybody follows. It's just a process. It's our best method of determining truths from reality. Scientists are humans that are fallible. They have limited ranges of senses and cognitive capacities, and they hold biases, and they work within the institutions of science. And the institutions of science are the areas that have gained credibility, and they disseminate the information that we gain. So it's when people attack science, you have to be a little more specific about what facet of it, because there are limitations in science, because it is an institution run by humans. But the method of science is our best thing from determining truth from falsehood.
You sound like what Carl Sagan said. Carl Sagan, of course, we all love Carl Sagan's writing. He was ahead of his time, right? He said the greatest thing that we have, the greatest method that we have, is this thing called empiricism, the scientific method in science. It's not perfect. If you're a Christian, you're watching this today, it's not perfect, but it is the best thing we have. And just because we don't understand how things all started, causation, cause and effect, pre-Big Bang and everything, doesn't mean it implies a supernatural designer. All it means is we don't know, correct? Until we find out.
Exactly.
So, anything else, guys? Because I'm going to wrap it up.
That's all.
All right.
I guess so.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching the Atheist Roundtable with David Oliverio and my buddies here. And Matthew, thanks for coming on. You did great.
Having me, man.
I love to hang around these smart guys and girls. I'm hoping that his IQ some of it will jump off from him to me. And I'm trying to steal some of your IQ. So y'all have a wonderful day. Bye.
See y'all next time.
Later.